Knives Out is the special access podcast. You've been granted highest level clearance to the one-stop shop for news, reviews, and stories of the weird, wild, and wonderfully mysterious haunted planet on which we live. Join me as I attempt to leave the carpet store and investigate all of the fantastic phenomena, incredible claims, felonious fabrications, and hilarious high strangeness of the planet Earth. Before the night owl, before the animal noises, it's the Special Access Podcast, and my name is David Logan. Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to this new and very special edition of the Special Access Podcast. The guest on this episode is the one and only legendary researcher himself, Grant Cameron. Thank you to all my new followers and listeners since last time. We're ever expanding, and welcome aboard. You will not be disappointed by what we have in store in the future. The biggest thank you goes to my listeners who have come back for more. If you stay tuned to the SAP, you will not be disappointed. Just wait until you hear what's coming up, folks. It's exciting stuff. You thought Grant Cameron was exciting. You just wait. Please follow, like, and subscribe. You can follow my Twitter at @D_Logan and contact me via email at specialaccesspod or specialaccesspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on the gram as Special Access Podcast. The next episode has already been recorded and it was a hoot, folks. So tune in next time. A special shout out this week goes to Andrew Hall of Dead Hand Radio. Andrew provided me some assistance in contacting Grant, and I was recently on Andrew's podcast, Dead Hand Radio. I highly recommend you all watch that and follow Andrew online, andrewhall.com. I had loads of fun on Andrew's show, by the way. I just hope that I was a good guest. I've been invited to be a guest on another podcast, but I'm not going to announce that just yet. Just wait and see who it is. So now on to Grant. At the start of this interview, I mentioned a stunning synchronicity that I've had recently involving Grant Cameron and Mike Cleland, also Nicole Sakic and Rich Giordano. I will detail the whole story in the next episode, but the whole affair has had quite an impact on my outlook and the trajectory of this podcast. So tune in next week for full details of that story. It's a stunner. It was for me anyway. What can I say about Grant? Now on to Grant. What can I say? I have always liked him as a researcher. I've been following this man for years. I've been listening to him and reading his books. Managing Magic is a classic. I recommend everyone read or reread that book. After talking to Grant face to face, I now like him as a person too. He's friendly and a whirlwind of information. So here he is, a man that needs no further introduction, Grant Cameron.
From the far horizons of the unknown come tales of new dimensions in time and space.
Question: why you use a triangle?
What's that? Oh, a triangle.
Why do you?
It's a bit of a long question, but it's partly to do. I came to the UFO field through the occult, so I'm very. I think about triangles and circles and squares a lot.
Oh, I'm writing a book on triangles. That's why I asked.
Wow.
Yeah, just about finished.
Oh, great.
And so the question I ask in the book is, why are aliens obsessed with triangles? And so when I saw your thing, I go, oh, there's another triangle. It's actually kind of interesting.
I was trying to fit in as much occult symbology as I could into that small space that I had with the software I had. It was just a quick job.
Did you write? Have you written about it?
No, I have not. No. I'm not much of a writer. I'm not even much of a researcher, to be honest. I would count myself as a podcaster more than anything. I've got no grander claims than that.
Interesting. Yeah.
But thank you for agreeing to talk to me tonight. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. When when I saw that you had talked to Mike Cleland and it had dropped the day after I was talking to him, that was a bombshell moment in my life so far, to be honest. And
that's good.
Yeah, I felt compelled to write to you, and you had just been on my friend's show as well, so I thought now is the time. And I'd always wanted to interview you for this too. But before we get to the main topic, I'd like to discuss synchronicities with you tonight, if that's okay,
sure.
And a couple of other things. But before we get to that, you've got more time in the field, in the UFO field, than possibly anyone I've ever talked to. What's the main focus of your research these days? Because you started out on one path and now you're on a very different one.
Well, basically, if you look at my career, it's one path after another path. I fall down one rabbit hole, get out, go down another rabbit hole. I can give you the background, which will sort of give you how it all unfolded. I had no interest in UFOs. I was interested in paranormal stuff. I was interested in Edgar Cayce. I was attending a university when this all started. And as I said, I had no interest in UFOs. It's just a small town by the name of Carmen, Manitoba, Canada, right in the middle of Canada. This town was seeing these UFOs all the time. And it was in the news all the time. And because I was kind of interested in, Edgar Cayce, I said to my friend, I said, well, why don't we go out and see what they're looking at? And he said, okay, we'll go out. And this was February of 1975. And we never went. And it was May of 1975. The local TV station got this thing on a jumping off the ground. They caught it on the ground and it was jumping off the ground. They filmed it. So then it went viral in the city. I live in a city of about 700,000 people. It went viral. And then I said to my friend, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. So I always describe it as I bought the lottery ticket, knowing there's a chance I could win, but knowing I'm not going to win. I'm not going to see anything. So we went out there and we drove into town, out of the town. It went on for an hour. And my friend said, okay, we'll drive back into town one more time. If you don't see anything, let's go home. I said, fantastic. Been a total waste of time. We turned around to go back into town, and the thing came from the left to the right. It was in very close. It was not a light in the sky. It was an object in very close to the car. It was bobbing up and down. It was red. It was plasma. It was glowing. Whoa, there it is. We just knew. We didn't say, is that what it is? So anyway, to make a long story short, we have a number of sightings. I have 5 close encounters during 1975-76. Got these things on the ground. We're investigating. We're filming. I'm taking people out there like a tour guide to see all this kind of stuff. And then I write a manuscript. I go to all the people in the town. I figure this is the most important thing I've ever seen. So why is nobody covering the story? Why is nobody investigating this? So I went into the town and I interviewed, 100, 200 people or whatever in this small town. And basically half the town had seen it. I wrote a manuscript, and say 1976, 77, nobody could have cared less. Nobody cared. And so then I said, okay, sightings is a waste of time. This is a waste of time. I'm not interested in this anymore. I just want to know, who knows what I saw. I saw this thing, and I saw it up pretty close, and it was pretty mind-blowing. And yet I didn't know what it was or what it was doing or whatever. It was just like pretty weird. So I said, somebody's got to know what's going on. So that's when I start the pursuit of chasing high-level people. And I still sort of do that. So I went after the Canadian government. What was the Canadian government doing in 1950, from 54? They were talking to aliens. They had, Flying Saucer Observatory. They had all this kind of stuff. Then when they caught a UFO going over the nation's capital, the government just shut the program down. And so I went to there. And then they had been told, the head guy for the Canadian government had been told that flying saucers was the most highly classified subject in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. The subject was tremendous significance, and mental phenomena was involved. So then I went to the United States to find out, with this top secret memo I'd been in, where did the Canadians get their information from? Who was telling the Canadians that flying saucers existed and it was the most highly classified subject in the United States? I ended up chasing around the former president of Penn State University, which is the big Ivy League engineering college in university in the United States. This is, had 14 honorary doctorate degrees, Dr. Eric Walker. And he basically told us, yeah, it's for real. Leave it alone. There's nothing you can do about it. Unless you have the mind of Einstein, you're wasting your time. You're up against the windmills. And he would play these games with us. And we chased him for 8 years. And then the next step was, he had talked about these files. In 1950, there had been a briefing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. and Walker had been there. Somebody squealed on him and said he'd been at this briefing where they had this crash recovery and stuff, and they were briefing these scientists and engineers on what they discovered. So we went looking for Walker's files from 1950, and he indicated that he would give it to the Truman Library. That's how I ended up with the president. So I went to the Truman Library looking for Walker's files, and when I was there was really nothing there. There was really nothing to find, and so I'm a long way from home, so I said, so what do you got on UFOs? I figured, well, the president's the most powerful guy in the world. He's got to know what's going on here. And so I asked, and they said, well, we got these telegrams from 1952 when they were overflying the White House, and Truman gave a shoot-down order, and all these people were sending in telegrams, don't shoot him down, don't shoot him down. So they had all these telegrams that had gone into the White House. And then I spent a number of years chasing the presidents around. What do the presidents know? Basically came to the conclusion, the presidents may know, but they know a lot less than people think they know. And there's no documents in the libraries. They basically, it's a subject, it's done orally. You don't put it on a record because it's a very dangerous kind of subject to be talking about. So I did that. And then what happens is 2012, and that's when I get shifted again. So I'm 2012. I'm watching Colin Andrews, who came up with the term crop circles. He's giving a lecture in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm there. It actually may have been Laughlin, not Phoenix. It was either Laughlin or Phoenix. It was the World UFO Congress. So I'm there, and it's one of these congresses that goes from 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. You don't go to every lecture because, there's just too much stuff going on. So I said, I'm not interested in crop circles. I don't think I'm going to go to the lecture. And I sort of dodged it. And then I thought, well, Colin Andrews is a pretty he's a pretty prominent guy. I should pay him respect, and I should go to his lecture. So I said, okay, I'll go to his lecture. I'm not interested in crop. I'll go watch. So he's talking about consciousness and crop circles, and he's talking, and I'm not paying attention. I'm sort of zoning out, and I'm sort of not paying attention. I'm zoning out. All of a sudden, boom, into my head comes 3 items that come into my head. And it basically says, the answer to that question in 1975, what is this? What's going on? It's consciousness. And I was like, what? It's consciousness. It's like, and it basically told me 3 things. It gave me, the Canadians were told in 1950, it put this piece of a puzzle into my head. And the piece of the puzzle was this top secret memo the Canadians had gotten. And it said in the top secret memo, we were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. And the Americans aren't doing very well because they've asked us if we're working on it, they're willing to exchange credentials and talk to us. So and the thing was, nobody talked to an alien until 1952. The first aliens did not appear until 52. So how did the Americans know to tell the Canadians that mental phenomena was involved? How would they know this? It's just lights flying around in the sky. And the second piece that popped into my head was Dr. Eric Walker. And at one point in an interview in 1991, they've been asking him, a guy from London, or from England was interviewing him. And he said to him, what's the control group? Is there still 12 people? Is it an American group or is it an international group? And he said, look, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy had no answer. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken into the control group. So that was the second piece of the puzzle that put in my head. The third was Ben Rich, Lockheed Skunk Works, 1993. He's talking about, we've got the technology to take ET home. And Jan Hartson, the former director of MUFON, confronts him as he's going out of the room and says, I need to know. I had a UFO sighting when I was 9 years old. I need to know how do UFOs work. I want to build a flying saucer. I'm fascinated. And he turns around and he says, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan Hartson goes, what? Not expecting a question. He goes, it means everything in time and space is connected. And he said, that's how it works. Turns around and walks away. So that's what happened. It gave these 3 pieces of the puzzle, put them in my head, and I go, oh, that's how it works. That's the answer. It's consciousness. But I thought it was consciousness. Then I realized it was non-local consciousness, that consciousness is non-local and stuff like that. 2013 is the next event. I'm giving my first consciousness lecture. I'm in at the same conference, the UFO Congress. And after the woman says to me, she says, you still got to talk to Pam Dupuis. And I said, yeah, I guess so. I'm thinking I must have agreed to talk to this woman. I know who she is. That's good. She's coming to the house on Monday. So I'm at this house on Monday. This woman, she's in her 70s, comes up and says, what did Stacy tell you about me? I said, I don't know. I'm just supposed to talk to you. So that's good. Comes walking in the house. I have no idea what's going on here. So she sits down. She's a remote viewer and she's been abducted and this and that. You hear all these stories all the time. It's like, whatever. She's telling me all these stories. And then she drops the bomb. She says, and I was flying the flying saucer last night. And I went, you were what? She says, I was flying saucer. I said, they let you fly the flying saucer. I was ready to throw her out of the house. I was just, come on. I'm not stupid. And and she's like in her 70s. And because, it's the idea, like a Saudi Arabian woman until a couple of years ago couldn't drive a car without her husband or somebody in the car. She couldn't drive. And it's like, but they let women fly the flying saucer. It's like, come on. And so I said to her, I said, well, how do you fly a flying saucer? And she says, oh, you do it with your mind. And then I got 50 people after that. So that was a synchronistic event. That happened. And within a couple of years, I've got the biggest collection. I got 50 people who have flown the flying saucer. So somebody will say, oh, I was flying the flying saucer. I go, hang on, stop. Tell me how you fly a flying saucer. Tell me exactly the steps. And it's like they're reading off a cue card. You're sitting there. You go into the craft. There's people behind you. And you're standing on the craft. And they say, go ahead and do it. And then you say, I don't know what to do. And then they say, you know what to do. Just do it. You go put your hand on a ball or a panel or on a wall, on a thing. There's a guy out of Liverpool told me the story about the wall. There's a panel on the wall. He puts his hand on the panel. Suddenly you can see 360 degrees in all directions. You can see it all 360 degrees. You become one with the craft. The craft is alive. You become one with the craft, and whatever you think is what the craft does. And you can say, I want to be outside the Milky Way. In 1 second, boom, you're outside the Milky Way looking back at the Milky Way. So it's that kind of thing. And so then 2014 is the next event. I get a phone call. No, 2013, I'm going to do a lecture, and I'm going through North Carolina where Chris Bledsoe is. Now, Chris Bledsoe is a very famous contactee, but I knew him before he was famous. So I'm there, and I want to see, he's got this burning tree. They asked for this message. They're going to do this movie about his story, and he wants a sign. Mel Gibson from Warner Brothers wants a sign, and suddenly the tree starts burning, and it burns 3 times in 6 hours, and they go, okay, we're going to do the movie. This is a sign. So I want to take pictures of the tree and talk to him, and I have this bizarre experience with the dog, where I'm there, and they keep letting the dog in the house. He has 3 dogs, big dog, medium dog, little dog. Keeps letting these dogs into the house. And so the first time they come in, and Chris says, what are you guys doing back in the house? And I'm looking, and these dogs are there. I don't know what's going on. And he goes to the front door. Front door is wide open. He says, come on, get outside. Puts the dogs outside. I go. I'm giving a lecture in Florida. I come back 2 days later, and it's happened 2 more times. He was in the house. The dogs are back in the house. The front door is wide open again. And then he said, I go to the bathroom. I go in the bathroom. I come back out of the bathroom. The dogs are back in the house. The front door is wide open. And I'm going, whatever. You left the door open. So I come back. Within 10 minutes, if I come back, I take some pictures of the tree. The dog is behind us. The big black lab is behind us. I say, Chris, he says, let's go in the house. I said, okay, good. We go in the house. The dog comes on my left side. I've got light colored blue jeans on. Dog comes, and all of a sudden I hear him go, Nellie, what happened to you? And the dog is there, and the blood is shooting at the dog's neck on the wall. And it's like, and it's just like, wow. And then I go, like, when they're letting the dogs into the house, it was like, you're leaving the door open. I go run into the car, I get the camera, I start photographing all this stuff. And he puts his hand on, and then he lifts his hand up, and the rag is all full of blood, and the people are cleaning blood up, and it was just really a horrendous scene. And the dog takes off, and there's nothing wrong with the dog. They can't find a cut on the dog. And I look at my pants, and my pants are completely covered with blood. It was like the dog had been standing there for 10 minutes and blood up and down my pants. And it was basically a sign to me, you were impressed with us letting in the dogs in the house? Watch this. Yeah. And it was like this show, what I call the theory of wow, where I think a lot of ufology, that's all they're doing. They want you to go wow. They want to do this weird stuff. So in 2014, I know Chris Bledsoe is the real deal. Mm-hmm. He phones me up and he says, I get a message from you from the Guardians. I go, really? This is the Guardians are the ones he deals with. I go, you got a message from me for the Guardians? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, so what's the message? And he said, oh, they want you to know the messages in the music. And I go, well, Chris, you may be talking to the wrong guy. I don't listen to music. I don't play music. I've never played an instrument. I could care less. He said, oh, you should listen to Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. I go, whatever. And it's like, I'm not even paying attention. And then he said, the other one you should listen to is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And this is a synchronicity. This is how they drag you in. Mm-hmm. So he says, you should listen to After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And this, if you listen to the song, it's like the Experiencer song. We're destroying the world. We're treating the world like a gold rush. When the gold is gone, it's going to become a ghost town. And the silver seeds are going to come and take the chosen ones off the planet. Yeah. So the flying saucers. This is what the song's about. Mm-hmm. And so I said, Neil Young is involved in this thing? Neil Young? I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which I describe as the city in Canada that even people in Canada don't want to visit. It's the coldest major city in the world. It's in the middle of the country. There's no trees. There's nothing here. There's no hills. Totally very cold place. But Neil Young grew up here.
Wow.
And we had some very famous musicians. So as soon as he said Neil Young, I said, Neil Young is involved? Then I got involved because Neil Young was a Winnipeg guy. And then I wrote this book called Tuned In, this whole story about how many experiencers are musicians, how musicians don't read and write music. They're getting the stuff out of the field, all this paranormal stuff about music. And so I had that one. And then the next rabbit hole I got dragged into, and none of these things I wanted to do. I didn't want to do any of this kind of stuff. So that one I was doing some books, and there was a girl who was helping me edit books, worked out of a law firm in Los Angeles, California. And she's a Latino. So she said, we're having this thing on Mount Shasta. You should come. We're going to meditate for world peace. And I go, well, Katerina, it's like, I got nothing against world peace. I got nothing against meditation. I don't think I want to drive 3 days across the United States to come and meditate for world peace. And she kept bugging me. And I said, well, she helped me out a lot. I'll go to California. I'll go sit on the side of a mountain with all these Latino people, and we'll meditate for world peace. So we go, and we're going across the desert. And my other assistant, Desta, who does, my books and my YouTube stuff. So she's with me, and suddenly her phone rings. She's got her cell phone, and we're in the car going across, heading for Reno, Nevada for the night. And she says, oh, there's a message from Aunt Terrell. A message from Aunt Terrell. Aunt Terrell is this alien that opened portals twice at Mount Shasta, 2014, 2015. So I'm going there, and I said, you got a message from Aunt Terrell? And I was like, and I knew Chris Bledsoe, this one had turned into a book. So I go, what's she saying? Get exactly what Aunt Terrell is telling. And this message came across. They knew I was coming to the mountain, and there was going to be a program sighting on Saturday night. So it's called Mission Rama. And I had no interest in them, none whatsoever. And basically what they do is they use automatic writing. Two people get a message, and they basically will tell you not only where the sighting will take place, but exactly to the minute when it will take place. The time that they got, later on, I found it was 9:33 on a Saturday night. It was August of 2017. And that's exactly when it appeared. This thing started to flash over my head at 9:33. I was like sold. I go, wow, man, these guys are like, I got to write these. So I wrote 2 books about this group, about how they can open these portals and these aliens and what the message is and all this kind of stuff. And it's been that kind of life, like one event after another. And we were just talking before the show. I had come across a number of people who had talked about the Mission Rama had a lot of things with triangles and circles and stuff like that. And then I realized that we had done a panel on triangles, and we had a bunch of people from around the world on triangles. And some of the biggest sightings in the world are triangles. Phoenix Lights, Belgian, the Illinois sightings, all these major sightings, these giant triangles, 1 mile or 2 miles across and stuff like that. And I always knew the theory of, wow, like, why do UFOs make triangles in the sky? Why do they form a triangle? Like, what is this, a pre-abduction maneuver or whatever? Or you're on the other side of the galaxy, and Zogar says, let's go across the galaxy here. And it's like, what are we going to do when we get there? I don't know. Let's make a triangle in the sky. And it didn't make any sense. Like, why are they making these triangles? And then I had a local woman a couple of months ago who sent these photographs of these triangles on her wrist. One was like the outline of a triangle and these red lines across the triangle. And the other one was a red triangle. It was completely blacked in with like red triangle. And these triangles, and she wanted to know, I dream about triangles, why these triangles? And then I suddenly decided, like, this is kind of weird. I got to figure this out. Like, why these triangles? What's the deal with triangles? Like, why are aliens so obsessed with triangles? The answer actually came yesterday. I'm interviewing a woman by the name of Maureen Seberg, who writes for Psychology Today. She's got synesthesia. She sees colors in words and stuff like that. Very much she's an experiencer. I'm talking to her, so I'm doing interviews listening to interviews to prepare for the interview. So I'm listening to an interview. I'm walking down the back lane yesterday afternoon, and I'm listening to, she wrote a book called Struck by Genius, where this guy gets beat up, and he's able to see pi. He's able to see geometric pi and draw pi and draw mathematical stuff. And he's this savant, one of these, what is called an acquired savant. And she wrote a book about him, and they're actually doing a movie, which was basically approved yesterday. They're going ahead with this movie in Hollywood about this guy's story, about how he sees mathematics and he's a mathematical genius and stuff after he gets beat up in a bar. So I'm going down there, and Jason's talking, and he says, the guy's talking to him, and he says, oh yeah, and everything's made out of triangles. And then the guy says, what do you mean? No, it ain't everything. He said, yeah, like a square is just 2 triangles put together. And if you take a circle, there's no such thing as a circle. Because when you take a circle, if you take pixels on a TV screen and you take a circle, if you go down to the pixels, you'll see on the very edge of the circle, there's pieces missing. Mm-hmm. And you can take the smaller and smaller squares, and there'll always still be a piece. And that's why pi, this formula for pi, it'll never come to the end. You keep going and going and going. It can go forever. Mm-hmm. And that's because there is no such thing as a circle. There's only squares. And when I heard that, and he said, everything in the universe is made out of triangles. And I go, that's what's going on. It's a basic symbol. Everything in the universe is made out of triangles. I was just blown away. And when you hear it, you go, oh, and it's so weird because I'm working on a book on triangles, and suddenly this guy tells me that, and I didn't know that. And it's like, and then I'm finishing up this book on triangles, but I just sort of let myself go in whichever way they want. Or I did a thing on psychedelics. So I do a book called Contact Modalities, where I realized that certain people are able to get in the field. So if you've got a psychic or a channeler or whatever, everybody sort of disregards them. They just believe it or whatever. And I go, well, no, because I met people like Chris Bledsoe, and I know those people actually exist. Mm-hmm. So it's like they go to Chris Bledsoe, the government, and say, hey, Chris, so who are you talking to? How do you do it? I mean, do you think something? Or they're trying to figure out how do you make contact? So that's the idea of contact modalities, that these people, for whatever reason, are able to get in the field. And that if you look at experiencers, UFO experiencers, 40% of all UFO experiencers say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And that's critical, because that means that everything is in the field. All the answers are in the field, and it's the ability to access the field, to get in the field, get the answers, and come back out again. So I wrote this book called Contact Modalities, which is a pretty popular book. It's being used like a textbook. And I go through 70 different contact modalities. So I look at channeling, and I look at, remote viewing, and I look at everything you can think of, abduction, hypnosis, and I look at psychedelics. Mm-hmm. And I tried a number of these. I tried remote viewing. I tried lucid dreaming. I tried meditation. I tried hypnosis. Nothing really seemed to work. So I said, okay, I'm going to try psychedelics. Never done anything like this before in my life. So I'm using psilocybin, and I'm using high dose, and I'm not using a guide. Everybody said, you got to use a guide. I said, no, I'm not using it. And I use the very standard protocols that are used. So I'm using the protocols where you're using a headset, you're using a blindfold, you're under the covers, you don't move. You don't move enough finger. You just sit there, you have a playlist, and they play the playlist, and you're using high dose. You're not using low dose, you're using high dose. And the idea is what's called breakthrough. What you want to do is break through into the samadhi, nirvana, mystical state. You want to break through, get out of the left brain gets shut down. And so what I did is, and this book is coming out in about 5 weeks, called Breakthrough, the psilocybin school. And so I do 16 sessions, high dose sessions, one after another. I have a tape recorder. And for the first 9 or 10, I was taping them. And then I realized that by taping them, you sort of pull yourself out of the field because your left brain is active. Mm-hmm. And so I would not tape it. I would forget a lot of stuff, but I would, after I was finished, I would tape it. And I wrote this book called Breakthrough, and I go through 16 sessions. Now I'm working on the second book. And again, it basically wanted more. So I do the second book, and it's called the Super Bowl. So in Europe, you would call it the World Cup, but in America, it's the Super Bowl, the big game. And it's like, this is a Super Bowl. And I remember I had 2 sessions that I did, and the second was very dramatic. I was getting a lot of stuff. I was interacting with this force. I could ask questions, and I was getting answers and stuff like that. And so I was reporting to people. I did an audio tape of this session and describing what had happened, and I'm sending it to my friends. And then, so I'm writing up the thing that goes with it, and says, oh, this is actually chapter 2 of the book called, that's going to be called The Super Bowl. And this voice comes in my head and says, of course it's called the Super Bowl. What the hell else would you want to call it? So it's that kind of thing. I'm sort of in the field now where I can pick up this stuff almost daily. The stuff is coming, and it's very distractive because you're going, oh, I got to remember that. You don't have a pen. Oh, I got to remember that. And it just comes in your head. And so this happens to me all the time. And that's my journey. So it started with UFOs, but there's not much UFOs anymore. Yeah. It's basically this bizarre thing of understanding that there is a field of knowledge. Memory is perfect. And if you can get in there and grab this stuff and pull it out, and some people can do it. So I spend a lot of time dealing with experiencers, with people who have, channeling abilities and stuff like that. And I take them seriously, and I try to figure out, I'll give them questions. Can you ask them this? Can you ask them that? Because that's basically what it's about, is trying to figure out how reality works. So it started as UFOs, but now has changed into, I'd say my basic thing right now is I'm interested in how does reality actually work? How does the actual world actually work? And what I've been told in my session was, they said, first thing they said, I forgot one download. I had a real dramatic download in 2017 where I was given 24 things. I'm walking down a street and this stuff is coming into my head and I know, write it down. I'm writing this stuff down. And it's basically giving me stuff like, is the world made out of little nuts and bolts? If it is, that's one world. Mm-hmm. But if the world's made out of consciousness, that's a completely different world and all the rules are going to change. Is it random? If the world is random, that's one world and has all the rules. But if it's not random, if it's pattern, that's a whole different world. Mm-hmm. Is it one life? If it's one life, well, that's one world. But if it's multiple lives, everything is going to change. And then it said to me, not only have you got it wrong, it's exactly the opposite of what you think it is. And that turned out to be true. And then the second thing it told me was, you are an ignorant, arrogant little piece of, you fill in the blank. You think you understand how reality works. You haven't got a clue. And the worst part about it is you don't realize you're an ignorant, arrogant little piece of fill in the blank. You think you understand how reality works and you have no clue. And the last one they gave me was called the wrong blocks, which is the concept that we got a bunch of blocks and we're shuffling these blocks around. And Einstein said, you cannot solve a problem using the same information you used to create the problem. So we got all these wrong blocks, things that are wrong. So we used to believe the world was flat, the sun goes around the earth, we're the center of the universe, all these wrong blocks. And we're shuffling, and then we replace that block, we get a right block and wrong, but most of the blocks we've got are wrong. And that's what they're saying to me. You've got the wrong blocks. You've got to have new blocks. And the only way you can get new blocks is to have a new experience. Christopher Columbus sails over the ocean, or somebody has a noetic experience where they're in the field and they come back with some information, or Jason Paget says everything in the universe is made out of triangles. Then it's like, oh, that's a right block. That's replace the block I had, put in the right block. So that's how my whole thing is unfolded. So it's the consciousness bottom line to this thing. And the UFO thing, I basically think I think the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena, I'd even say now, I'm pretty sure it's not even going to be ET. It's pretending to be ET, but it's much more complex than that. And so I spent a lot of time talking to experiencers, UFO experiencers. And whereas you would say to them, when you're abducted on the ship, what did the ship look like? Did they probe you? Did it hurt? Were you scared? Did you feel threatened? Did you feel violated? And I say to them, I go, hey, you're on the ship? You were dealing with an alien? And they go, yeah. Can I ask you a question? What? Do you have any clothes on? And they go, everybody says the same thing. Go, no, I don't think so. No, I think I don't have any clothes on. And I say, do you have any sex organs? And they go, no, he didn't have any sex organs. I said, well, how do you know it was a man or a woman? And then they go, I just knew. They'll tell you, it's a woman. I knew it was a woman. And then I'll say, like, did it have any belly button or nipples? No. And then I say, oh, did it have a mouth? And they'll go, well, not really. It had sort of slit, didn't have a mouth, no nose, no ears. And it's like, hello, take a closer look. What are we looking at? Is this really an alien? If it's an alien, why is it missing all these critical parts? And then I even ask people, and these experiencers go ask the alien. They say, are you an alien? And the being would say, no, that would not best describe who I am. And they would go through this whole thing. Well, then who the hell are you? And they would basically say, when we come into the physical world, we take on a physical body. And we can take on whatever body we want, and it's determined by what you're thinking. And we don't. And it's this idea they're etheric beings, that they're coming in and taking these bodies. And a lot, if you ask experiencers, did you ever ask them as an alien? And if they do, usually it's like, no, not really. Or before it used to be in the 1950s, it was like, oh, we're from Mars, we're from Venus, we're from the moon. And then we suddenly realized, no, nobody lives there. And then it was suddenly, oh, we're from Alpha Centauri, we're from the Pleiades. And now it's all changed because now we do multidimensional universes. So now it's like, oh, we're in the 5th dimension. We come from the 11th dimension. And to me, it's like they're playing this wow game that they want you to think, like making triangles in the sky, putting triangles on people's body. And that's what they do. When the people have a triangle in their body, they go, what the hell is going on? And they know this isn't a dream. This is for real. And they're trying to figure out what is going on with me. And that's what they do. They put the breadcrumbs down because you and I have to solve the problem. They're not going to land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going on. They want us to figure it out. And the core story, according to what I understand, is number one, we are being visited by we are interacting with some sort of intelligence. Number two, we have hardware. We actually have hardware, and I believe it's being dropped. They are not crashing. They are dropping this stuff on purpose. It's called the gifting field, and we have no clue. We cannot back engineer this stuff. I've heard this from high-level officials many times. We can't. In fact, there's one document called the Wilson document. There was a document I sort of leaked onto the internet. On the very end of the document, it says, the briefing guy, they heard this rumor, the briefing guy had said, we have a craft, an intact craft that we believe can fly. We're not doing very well technologically. And nobody picked that up. And the key is, we have a craft that we believe can fly. So why have you not flown the craft? And you haven't flown the craft, it's because you can't fly the craft, even though you've got the whole craft, because you need a consciousness interface. Mm-hmm. You need consciousness to turn it on. That's how you fly it. So you can have all the hardware in the world you want. And that's the situation we're in, where we know UFOs exist, but we haven't got a clue. I can almost guarantee you, they have not got a clue. They know consciousness is involved. They know this is coming from somewhere. But in terms of back engineering, it's like getting a cell phone 200 years ago. Not only do you kind of figure it out, but you're going to need electricity, which you don't have. You're going to need cable lines. You're going to need the internet. None of that stuff you have. So to have that piece of equipment back a couple hundred years, you're not going to figure it out. So that's basically where I'm at. I'm very much into the consciousness thing, and the fact that UFOs it's going to be way less physical than people think it is, way more spiritual than people think it is. It's going to be, and the number one message is oneness. That's the number one message they're trying to get across to the world. And it's going to be 1,000 times more complex than people think it is, way more complex than people think it is.
Wow, that's a fantastic answer. Thank you. I've got quite a lot to ask you.
Yeah.
Do you think synchronicity, is synchronicity a contact modality, or is it a byproduct of contact?
Well, I haven't really worked that much on synchronicity. Synchronicity could be ourselves. It's almost like the idea where they told me, is it one life or is it multiple lives? So if it's multiple lives, then you and I both probably agreed to come in here and do something. Mm-hmm. And if you studied Dr. Michael Newton, which is a guy who did 7,000 regressions, where he took people into the past life, lets them die in their past life, takes them into the spirit world, and then goes from there. He says that before you come into the world, you go into a big 3D theater environment, and you actually see all the people that are going to interact. So in that thing, you and I may have seen you, and we have made an agreement, we're going to do a podcast. Down the road, we're going to do a podcast. And it's this idea that you're meeting all these people, and all the world's a stage, like Shakespeare. So all the world's a stage, all the men and women are but actors. So we come in, and we are not this player on the stage. We are actually watching, and we make the mistake of thinking we're on the stage. Our ego thinks we're here, we're alone, and there's nothing but me. We don't realize we're just playing a role, and next game we're going to play another role. And so you come in, and so what happens, I think, with synchronicities is you have these different events, and you set them up yourself. So when it happens, you think, oh, that's weird that would happen. And yet you and I may have planned it. We may have all this stuff and that's the idea behind Dr. Michael Newton, is nothing's really random. You're the one dealing the cards. So people have this idea, I'm an individual and all these things are happening. So COVID's happening to me, and the Hillary Clinton's happening to me, and my mother-in-law is attacking me, and I'm being buffeted around like a cork floating down a stream. We don't realize we're actually the ones that are putting the players in. We're the ones that are dealing the cards. And and so when the cards look very weird, like with me, when I look back on my life, when the synchronicities were happening, I had all these synchronicities that I happened to run into this, and this turned into a book, this turned into a book, and stuff like that. When you look back, you go, oh, that made sense. It's kind of like, no, that wasn't a random accident. And you start seeing it that way and realize, even if you get into the idea of time, the whole quantum physics idea that has always been in the paranormal world and the mystical world is there is no time and space. This is illusion. Mm-hmm. It's all Maya. It's all the illusion. And everything's happening, all your lives are happening at the same time, which to the, ego walking down thinking it's a player on a stage is like crazy stuff. Like, get out of here. Like, there's no way and yet if you look at John Wheeler, who won the Nobel Prize for physics, who came up with the idea of black holes and wormholes, he said, there is no out there, which is a total mess up your mind thing, that it's all here. And that's the whole thing behind the aliens. There is no aliens out there. It's all here. It's all, everything, as Deepak Chopra says, is an action inside of consciousness, or is an activity inside consciousness. It's all happening here. There's only one thing. It's all here. It's not physical, and it's happening in our mind and stuff. And that's what messes people up. But the synchronicity thing, I would definitely say the synchronicity thing indicates you're on the right path. Mm-hmm. That you're picking up the signals. When the synchronicities stop, you're you're going down the wrong road. Synchronicities sort of indicate, and I've had some really wild synchronicities. I mean, we had one of my assistants, Sinead Willihan, who's out of Toronto. She was helping me, and we had, in a 1 month period, we had these synchronicities like right off the chart. We had one where, and I call them like you're never going to believe this. We had 3, you're never going to believe these synchronicities in 3 hours. It was unbelievable. Like the one was one of the big books that people always, when you get in this thing about the theory of everything or reality, the books, one of them is Talbot. What's his first name? Michael Talbot's book, The Holographic Universe. He actually got it as a download. He was an experiencer. He was a UFO abductee. No, people don't know that. He wrote the book, and he was a download book. And the book that's come out now, that's basically the same as a book by Dr. Robert Lanza. And Lanza is a guy who's written 3 books, and it's on biocentrism, about the fact that biology is the center of the universe, whatever. And I remember the one I had was, my assistant was saying, I'm interested in quantum physics and stuff. I said, you should read Dr. Robert Lanza. His books are like key, the 3 books on biocentrism. And within an hour, I got an email from a guy in Florida who said, I saw you lecture in California, and you were talking about Robert Lanza. Here's 2 PDF copies of his book. And it's like, this happened an hour later. It's like, and that kind of stuff. And it sets you going. And it may even be your higher self that is setting stuff up to get you motivated. And I'll give you an example. I've got a very wealthy friend here in Winnipeg who had 2 UFO sightings. And that's all he's had is 2 UFO sightings. And he's of course, down the rabbit hole and stuff. And yet he's a big business guy, and he runs his business, whatever. So he had these 2, and one was he's watching a movie, and he's like, 10 minutes left in the movie. The movie's 2.5 hours. There's 10 minutes left in the movie. It's the highlight of the movie. And he suddenly says, I should go outside and skywatch. I should take my laser with me. And his wife said, are you crazy? The movie's got 10 minutes to go. What are you going for now? I was like, wait till the movie's over. He said, I got to go outside. And he goes outside, and his UFO goes flying by. As he comes out, and he shoots it with the laser, and he goes, why, I shouldn't have shot this thing with the laser. And then he has one coming down the back. He lives on the river, down in the city where I live. He comes down there, and he sees one in the river a couple of years later. So he gets this high-level psychic who the guy she sort of works with, used to run the remote viewing program for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, for the Air Force. And so he's using her as a to answer questions on his business. And he says, I saw these 2 UFOs. Can you tell me, who where were they from? And she goes, where were they from? They weren't from anywhere. He said, what do you mean they weren't from anywhere? They weren't from anywhere. You sent them. You're the one that sent them. You sent them to yourself to wake yourself up. And it's that kind of thing with synchronicity where you start to realize, like, maybe we are the ones that are doing this kind of stuff, and your higher self is giving you the instruction. Because the concept is it's all one thing. There is no us, you, and me. It's all one thing. We're all part of the same thing. And you even have the aliens. That's the number one message they want to get across. One of the examples they showed of this oneness thing, that we are all connected, is they Sherry Wild, if you've ever interviewed her, they're going to do a movie out of her book. It's called The Forgotten Promise. And she had piles and piles and piles, just the wildest story you've ever heard. And she's the one that actually asked them, are you an alien? He said, well, no, not really. And they said, what do you come in? She says, ugly looking gray thing. He goes, what do you mean, ugly looking gray thing? And because he said he was from Andromeda. And the publisher said, we can't be from Andromeda. He's gray. He's got to be from Zeta Reticuli. Go and ask him, like, what's going on here? He's pulling your, and he said, no, I'm not. So she had this thing where she says the beings take her, and they say, we want to show you something. And suddenly she's in her house. Her father's died, but her father's there sitting at the table. And he's just sitting there by himself at the table with his back turned to her. He's got this checkerboard shirt on, and she's up above him. And she says, what are you doing? He said, just stand here and watch. And then she's watching, and she says, I don't go. Stand here, just sit and watch. And her father takes the fork, and he drives the fork into his left hand. And the blood shoots out all over the place. And she goes, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then this is the lesson of the oneness. Whatever you do to someone else, you might as well do to yourself. And that's the whole deal, is that.
The screen's frozen, Grant. Shit.
Oh, you're back.
Yes.
You froze up. I froze up. I must have frozen.
We both froze. Sorry. Continue.
Okay.
Yep. We're back.
Yep. So we're ready.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the thing. That's the main message, I believe. Love is the basis of the universe, and oneness is the key message. That we're treating things as individuals. You got to realize that what you do, what I do, affects Gaia. It affects our neighbors. It affects the universe. And that's why they arrived in 1947, 1946, because everything is a bell. Everything is connected. So in 1945, when we detonated Trinity, the atomic bomb, the bell rang. It vibrated through the universe, and everybody picked it up. And that's why they came here. And that's the message. They're on this nuclear weapon thing. Stop the nuclear weapons. It affects everything. You think it's just you. It doesn't affect anybody. Everything you do affects you. It affects your neighbor. It affects Gaia. It affects the universe. We're all working as one. And we get into problems like with COVID, where you suddenly decide, oh, I'm an individual. Don't tell me what to do. And you got a football team or a soccer team or whatever, where it's like, do whatever you want. Hey, just run wherever you want. You don't have to play your position. Just and it all falls apart. Or like the human body, where all the cells of the human body, 80 trillion cells, all work together. 85 trillion cells all work together. And when one cell suddenly decides, oh, I'm different. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be a cancer cell. Don't tell me what to do. Then it all starts to fall apart. And that's what we've got today. That's what the beings are basically saying, is that you got 85 trillion cells and they're all going in different directions. And don't be surprised if the body gets sick. So that's the basic message I think they're trying to get across.
You said you had your initial download experience at Andrew Collins' lecture on crop circles. Do you think that was significant? Do you think the subject or Andrew Collins was significant to the event itself? The consciousness part was, because I really wasn't interested in the crop circles. Later, I sort of got interested in crop circles because of the whole theory of wow. Why did they put crop circles down? Because you're not going to figure it out. They just want everybody to go, wow, what the hell? What's going on there? And even if they're a hoax, people are still going, there's got to be aliens. I mean, and so the thing was the consciousness thing. Because I said, and it's the same as the music. When I got told about the music, I said to Chris, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm not interested in music. When it came to crop circles, I wasn't interested in crop circles, and I wasn't interested in consciousness. I say, and I can pretty well be assured of this, in 2012, when I got the consciousness download, I couldn't have spelled consciousness, and I couldn't have cared less. I had no interest. So when it hit, and the thing was, when these noetic situations, like in flow states or in mystical states, you'll get this what's called noetic information. So Edgar Mitchell's coming back from the moon, and he starts the Noetic Institute. And the noetic thing is where it suddenly comes into your head, and it's like you're talking to God. It's like, oh, it's like the information, and it's right. You don't have to question it. And that's what happened to Edgar Mitchell. He realized everything was one in the universe, that everything was connected, and he gave up his career as an astronaut to start the Noetic Institute because he had this bizarre experience. So when I had the bizarre experience in 2012 with Colin Andrews, I'm walking around for 2 days, and it's like, oh my God, it's like my head was spinning. It just affects you. It's not just an ordinary thought. And so that's why I became so interested in the whole contact modality thing, is because when I got the download, that's when I said, I wonder if anybody else got one of these things. Then I realized the Harry Potter books. So J.K. Rowling is going from a train from Manchester into London. She falls asleep on the train because it's delayed going into London. And she wakes up after this nap, and all 7 books of Harry Potter are coming into her head all at the same time, on the names and the places. And she said, I had no piece of paper. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't write it down. And it was all coming. The Wizard of Oz, download, instantaneous like that. The Wizard of Oz came in, and the guy's writing it on the back of envelopes and this kind of stuff. And the whole thing of what do you call it? The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, the main book used by AA. Half that came off an Ouija board from a 15th century monk by the name of Boniface. And people don't realize it. They think these guys are smart. Einstein, his theory, and I realized that all this stuff was happening in these noetic experiences. Einstein said, everybody thinks Einstein was smart. Guy failed mathematics. I mean, he was not really a smart guy. He said, he had this dream. I'm going with the toboggan. He said, I knew I had to understand that dream. In fact, you could say, and I would say, that my entire career was based on a meditation on that dream. And you see this over and over again. Paul McCartney, with the first download I ever got when I started looking at downloads after I had mine, Paul McCartney,
the song yesterday, the most produced song of the 20th century. He got it. Wakes up in the middle of the night and the song's in his head and there's a piano and he quickly records it and he gets the song and then he runs around for about a month with people and says, "You ever heard this song before?" And they go, because he was sure someone else had played the song. He heard it and they said, "No, I never heard that song before." And that's what I realized, is that you have this ability that people have these things. So that's why I wrote the book called Inspired, The Paranormal World of Creativity, where I look at people. I got like 13 Nobel Prizes. There would have been no Nobel Prize. The guy's sitting on a park bench, the laser comes into his head. He's working on the problem. So you got to do the work. But then you sit down and relax your left brain, and all of a sudden, boom, it pops in your head. Or the hologram came in a download. There's piles of Nobel Prizes that people got, that they created, they got the money for it and they got the patents for. And that's what's happening in the UFO field. There's a guy by the name of Tyler D. If you read the book American Cosmic, he's got 40 patent inventions. I talked to him in 2013. I was in a cottage with him and he said, "You know, Grant, that invention I got," and I heard they sold the invention, the company for $100 million on NASDAQ. And that came, there's no idea. He said, "You know, that idea got in my head and I was trying to put on the space shuttle." And they said, "Yeah, put this stupid thing on the space shuttle. There's no way." And then he said, no. And this is not going to work. This is totally stupid. He said, "The morning I got that idea in my head when I woke up," he said, "the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed." And I go, "Really? Could you see its face?" And you could never, and he goes, "No, I couldn't see its face." You can never see the hooded being is the wisdom being. And you can never see the face. For whatever reason, they black the face out. And you see these patterns. So I said, "Well, you should be regressed. You go to LA. He works with cancer kids." I said, "You go to LA. You should get Yvonne Smith to regress you to find out what the being and this sort of stuff." And he has this contact modality where he says, and it's described in the book American Cosmic, where he sits there and he sleeps for 8 hours. Then he gets up. But then he goes back. He said the important part is you go back to bed for 1 hour. Then you get up, and he lives in Florida. And then I get a big glass of water, and I go and sit in the sun, and I start drinking this glass of water, and the beings start to talk to me. And that's the whole deal. And Gary Nolan's the same thing. The guy's doing the DNA stuff with Kid Green. He's an experiencer. He's seen the beings since he was a little kid. Jim Semivan, the co-director of To the Stars, had the beings in his room with his wife. I mean, a lot of these people are experiencers. People think, oh, they're just figuring it out. People don't realize that whatever this intelligence is, it's interacting with a lot of people and giving people ideas, and people are just running with their material. So there's not bad guys out there. There's just guys who are very curious, and they may not be able to talk and stuff like that. Even Lou Elizondo seems to indicate that he's had some sort of experience. He won't talk about it, but that's what you sort of look when you see why is why is David down the rabbit hole? Why is Grant down the rabbit hole? There's usually a reason why they're down the rabbit hole. And what happens with the theory of wow is they make it really weird. And they make it really weird because you can't let it go. And you become obsessed, and your neighbors and your family all think you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? But you know what it's like when you get that thing, when you get in that, when it's a noetic experience, a download or whatever, you just can't let it go. And you're in it. Because a lot of people, I've been in it a long time, and over the years, people say, "Oh, that guy quit. He's had it. He's never come back. He said, that's it. UFOs. I'm never doing it." And I go, "Yeah, right. I heard that before. Yeah, don't worry. He's coming back. Nobody leaves." And that's true. Nobody leaves. You may leave for a couple of years, but you're coming back.
Yeah. So could you tell me a bit about your psychedelic experiences, please? When was the first one?
I guess I started back around beginning of COVID, I guess I started. And I did 16 in the first book, and I've done 2. So I basically had known that the idea of breakthrough, that you got to shut the left brain down. That's how the whole thing works. If you can you have 2 brains. People think you have 1. You have 2 brains and millions of modules that all work together. Same as the cells. All the modules work together, whatever. And that what's happening with us is that your left brain keeps you in the physical world. And it's the one that has the fear. It's the one that says, "David, you're having a bad day. I mean, you're messing this thing up. You're stupid, whatever. You should commit suicide." And that's the left brain. It's creating all this noise. And everybody can hear the signal. As I said, all 40% of experiencers say when they were in the field, so they get moved into this field, their ego shut down. And that's why I say, when you see an alien, I always say, I guess I think a bit different than other people. So I say, why does an alien wake you up? So the being's in your room and it's going, David, wake up. Come on, David, wake up. I'm an ugly looking alien. Wake up. Take a look at me. Yeah. And then come on, David, open your eyes. Take a look. And then you go, oh my God, I'm an ugly alien. And then they tap you and go, okay, go back to sleep. What they're doing, I believe, and I ask people, I said, what do you do? And they said, oh, I just pulled the covers over my head and went back to sleep. They told me to go to sleep. So I pulled the covers over my head and went to sleep. And I go like, does that make any sense? You're so scared. You've never been so scared in your life, and you're going to pull the covers over your head and go to sleep? Come on, this makes no sense. But what they're doing is they're forcing you to dissociate. So that's what happens. That's what psychedelics does. It will kill the ego. You'll have people who do, like Sting, the famous musician. Sting, he did the ayahuasca in Brazil. And basically, there was the idea was, when you do this, when you do the psychedelics, it kills the ego. So your ego is crushed, and you suddenly realize everything's alive, conscious, and everything's connected. Everybody says the same thing. My ego was crushed, and I suddenly realized everything's alive, conscious, and connected. And so that's what I was trying to get, is that breakthrough experience. And as I said, I tried everything else. So I tried it the first time I did it. The experiences I had were, and the way I go into it is I don't go in asking questions. I just say, okay, I'm here to learn a lesson. I'm going to, that's why I call it the psilocybin school. So, okay, I'm going to school, and I'm going to follow the rules, and I'm going to, I know I've got to let the ego go, and I'm going to do my best. And so I go in, and I do the high dose, and the lesson I get was compassion. So I saw these kids that were put in the cage on the U.S. border, because I was on the U.S. border just before this happened. And I saw this family with these two young kids. And I could never forget these two young kids. I'm thinking, God, these kids are in cages now. Like, oh my God, how can you do this? It's like Nazi Germany. And so that's what it showed me, this compassion. And I remember the kid in this experience, and psilocybin has real emotion. It's like your emotions just going through the roof. And I'm there, and this kid, I'm in the cage with this kid, and the kid's just looking at me. And he's looking at me as if, why don't you do something? Because I can sort of speak. Some people listen to me, and I was never so embarrassed in my life that I knew that kid was in the cage, and I had never spoken out, never said anything about it. And then I was on the Mediterranean. So suddenly I'm in the Mediterranean, and it's a refugee. It's a woman. She's got these two kids, and I become the woman. And she's got these two kids. She's got her arms around these two kids, and she's trying to get to wherever, to Italy or wherever she's going or whatever. And this big storm is up, and the storm is coming. The water's coming, and she's trying to protect her kids from the storm or whatever. And suddenly in my head, I'm her, and I suddenly realize we are not going to make it. We are not going to make it to the promised land, wherever it is. In fact, we are about to die. And she's trying to shelter these kids, realizing we're about to die. And so I was that. And so it was this compassion. And then the second one, what was the second one? Despair. The second session I did, it was all about despair. And then I had the one about death. So the one, I think it was in session 4. So I go in there, and it's the same thing. I just go in and I say, okay, whatever I need to learn tonight, whatever it is. And it would usually be one thing. Now it's more than one thing when I go in. But the one thing was death. So I wake up, I'm there, and I'm going, I'm in a coffin. And I can't see the coffin, but I know I'm in a coffin. And I'm in a cathedral, and I'm at the front of the cathedral facing this way, and the top of the coffin is over. And there's light coming in from the left side of the thing. And I'm sitting there, and I'm going, why is the light only coming in from the left side? Because you have the big stained glass windows, but it wasn't, the light was coming in, but it was only coming in from the one side. And I'm sitting there, I'm going, this is kind of weird. I don't feel dead, but I knew I was in a coffin, and it was that kind of thing. So I'd go through these different sessions, and they would give me these lessons. So they went lesson. And the thing was to record it, because when you're doing high dose, it's like a dream. It's the same thing. What you do is you rip the filter. It's like, when you dream, your left brain shuts down, you go into the field, and if you ever have the experience, wake up in the morning and you've got the dream and you want to remember the dream, the thing you have to do is do not move anything. Do not move a finger, because as soon as you move a finger, the left brain goes, oh, David's awake. Okay, let's go. He's awake. And they shut the filter. They shut the filter down, and it all goes back. So that's what happens in psychedelics, is that you're in the field and the filter is ripped open. So you come in here, and then you want to record it. It's going back. It's like a dream. It's like watching water go down a toilet. You go, no. And you can actually see it going back. You're trying to remember. No, I want to remember that. And it's fading. And that's what I think is happening. You're moving you're here now. You're not going anywhere, but you're moving into this vibration. And what you're doing is ripping the filter. So that's what hypnosis does. It quiets the left brain, which rips the filter. Psychedelics does the same thing. Meditation. What you're doing in meditation, you're not quieting the brain. You're quieting the voice. You're trying to, every time the voice talks, you take a little balloon, you make it float away, and you're basically saying to the left brain, we know you want to help here, but we need you to go for coffee. We got some work to do here. Get out of the way, because the left brain is creating the noise that you can't hear the signal. The signal is there for everybody. Everybody that experiences this, all the answers are in the field, all the memory is perfect. It's the ability to get in that the left brain is creating this noise factor. And if you can shut it down, you can actually get in the field, get the material, and then come back in. And so there was this deal of practicing how to remember it when I came back in, how to record it. And in the first 16 sessions, I can say I remember the highlights, but I don't remember anything. And luckily, I recorded. It's a 400-page book, but I don't really remember anything because it all faded right back into the field.
Mm-hmm. And when is that book out? I heard you say on Andrew's podcast that you were thinking about not releasing it at all.
Yeah, well, we are going to release it. I'd say about 5 weeks, because I have a book that Richard Dolan had published. It was called UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants. And I wrote that in 1991, the first time I wrote that book. And that was about the idea that I believe there's a gradual cover-up. There are people inside the government who are leaking material. And the way they leak it is they take disinformation, they put it around the information, they put it out. It's all plausible deniability. So you can never figure it out. You can never confirm it. And they put it out. And people talk about it. And that's all they want to do is raise the consciousness so that what happens in 1995 when the New York Times comes out with the article and says, oh yeah, the government's got a program. And everybody goes, yeah, I knew that, Ray. I knew that. And that's what they're doing. They're acclimatizing people to the point where, and it's going to be the other point where they're going to say, it was alien. It's like, it's some sort of intelligence that's flying it. And everybody's going to go, yeah, I knew that, Ray. And that's what they're doing. So I wrote that book in 1991. I redid it in 2016. And then I had to update it again because all this recent stuff has happened. And Richard Dolan's no longer publishing books. And I have a publishing company where I try to help people publish books and stuff like that. So I said, okay, we'll take it. And we redid it. And so that one's coming out like in maybe today or tomorrow it'll be out. And then I'm going to delay the one with the because there's no point in putting two books out at once, the psychedelic book. And then the next book that's coming out is we're going to do the Canadian book on the Canadian government, what the Canadian government was doing in the 1950s, talking to aliens, all this kind of stuff with the channeling they were doing. Because in those days, because people don't realize what happens now didn't happen before. People always make this mistake. If you've only been in the field for a little while, people will always make this mistake of believing that this is the way it's always been. And I can absolutely guarantee you, this is not the way it's always been. In 1975, nobody believed that you had more than one sighting. There's no way. If you were absolutely insane, if you said you had more than one sighting, no way. It's a random event. You're in the right place at the right time, wrong place at the right time. Travis Walton was abducted the same year as me. There was nobody discussing abductions in 1975. There was only been a couple of abduction cases. That was all there was. In those days, there was things called ground traces. So the UFO would land, would leave the tripod marks like it renders from forest, burn out the grass and all this kind of stuff, kill the red vegetation or whatever, affect the trees. That hasn't happened for 25 years. People think, no, it's not happening. Mm-hmm. And then the crop circles. There was no crop circles till 1982. There was in the 1950s and 60s, there was 60s, 70s, there was all these cases with angel hair. And I can go into a lecture now on angel hair and we're just going, what are you talking about? People have no idea what angel hair is. It doesn't happen anymore. Or the idea that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, there was UFOs with windows on them. There's nobody with windows anymore. The windows are gone. And you see these patterns and people really, what I say they're doing, it's like they're turning the pages of a book. Okay, watch this. Watch this. Like the crafts have changed. That's one of the things that with the triangles. It used to be all saucers. I had a triangle sighting in 1975, but it was weird. And when I was doing the triangle thing, I was going, man, I had one of those things too, but nobody had seen triangles in 1975. Now, there was a book put out that showed the odd case. And okay, yeah, maybe you're going to find one case back in 1930, someone saw a UFO, a triangle, whatever. But no, the triangles basically are a recent thing, or the reptilians. So people say, oh, the reptilians are eating people and whatever. Reptilians were not talked about before 1988. It's defy anybody to find a reference to aliens that are reptilians before 1988. People don't realize this stuff keeps changing. It's almost like they started in 1896, and they're these wooden ships. And they got propellers, and they're flying around with these big giant lights, which you couldn't have because you need batteries. And they didn't have batteries in 1890. And they're flying around, and then they ask, where are you from? And they said, oh, from Mars. And of course, because Mars, everybody saw the canals on Mars, the telescopes stuff. Everybody thought Mars was invaded. So then in the 1940s, then it's these Foo Fighters, these little balls of light on the Allied planes. And then it turns to green fireballs. And then it changes to Adamski crafts with big balls under it. And then it changes to flying saucers with windows. And then it changes to triangles. And you can see They're changing the pattern all the time. They just keep changing it. And it's not the same thing. It's almost like they've done this on 1,000 different planets. And so first they send in the crafts with the propellers and the big lights and stuff, and then they're going to send in the Foo Fighters, and then they're going to send in the people who are saying we're from Mars and Venus and stuff, and they do the same pattern every time to acclimatize us, to move us through, gradually move us through and lead us, because we've got to figure it out. They can't come in and do. That's what the Canadians were told. If there's a nuclear exchange, the Canadians were told by an alien by the name of Alpha, if there's a nuclear exchange, we will come in and we will stop it. And we can stop a nuclear exchange. To prove that we can stop it, we can take the moon in front of the entire world. We can split it in half and put it back together in front of the entire world to prove that we can stop a nuclear exchange. Other than that, we'll allow the human race to stew in its own juices. So they're not going to do anything. If we destroy the world, it's a reincarnation world. You're coming back to do it someplace else. But they're not going to allow us to destroy the world. I don't think they really care if we destroy ourselves. That's just karma. That's you learning your lessons. But to destroy the world, they're not going to allow us to destroy the world with nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm. That's almost all the time I've got for tonight, Grant. I really want to thank you again for your time. But before we go, I'd just like to ask you quickly, just a couple of things. You said Chris Bledsoe said the Guardians gave the song Kashmir and After the Gold Rush to you. Did you get anything from Kashmir? Did you listen to it and hear why they...
I think he got the impression. I don't think they directly told him that, but he got the impression. I remember I still wasn't interested in music. So I remember a couple of years later, I was doing an interview and I said I still hadn't listened to Kashmir. And then he wrote me and he said, could you please listen to Kashmir? And Kashmir, the big thing was why they'd never been to Kashmir. Led Zeppelin had never been to Kashmir. And so they wanted to sing. After the Gold Rush, I've listened numerous times, and because I discovered that a lot of people, a lot of experiencers, Patti Smith, an experiencer, she sang After the Gold Rush. The Flaming Lips, they sang After the Gold Rush. He's an experiencer. Mm-hmm. He tells a story about being a kid. And I suddenly realized there was all these experiencer musicians who were singing After the Gold Rush. And I'm going, this ain't coincidence, man. They pick up on the vibe of it or whatever. So I still really don't listen to too much music. In fact, there's just been another list put out. I was going to do book 2, and somebody just put out a whole list because I always call myself a musical idiot. So I don't know all the songs. People say, oh, you missed this song, you missed that song, you forgot about this guy, that guy. So there may be another one. There's a whole list that's just come out on new musicians that people have identified as experiencers and, putting the message out through the music. And that makes sense because what happens with the music is if you're a kid between 1 and 10, your parents are your hero. Once the kid's 10 years old, it's like, Mom and Dad, could you please walk 10 feet ahead of me if my friends are around? And when they're 16, it's like, could you please not be around when my friends are around? They don't want anything to do with their parents. So when a kid's between 10 and 25, when he wants to be something in life, he wants to figure out what am I going to do? Who's he listening to? Musicians. That's and that's why they're putting it, because you've got to get the kid. When you're 20 years old, they're not going to abduct you. They could not care less about you because all the wrong blocks are in your head and they're all glued together. They're not doing anything with you. They want to get you when your mind is still open. That's why that's why they abduct kids as children, and that's why they put in messages through young children through music.
Mm-hmm. One last quick question. Did you mentioned at the start of the interview that you were really into Edgar Casey back in your day. Yeah. What do you make to David Wilcock's claims of being the reincarnation of Edgar Casey?
I don't think so. I actually, it could be, but my impression back in the day was that he would come back in 2100. There's actually a reference in the Edgar Casey files where he comes back in 2100 and these guys with glasses come and they take him on a saucer shaped quiet craft in 2100. So he actually described when he was going to come back. So I don't think, maybe he's picking up on the vibration. You'll get a lot of this where maybe people can use the same vibration as somebody else or whatever, but that I don't really follow his claims. But I did follow a lot of the Edgar Casey stuff in terms of the whole idea that is the same idea. There's a field. Same as the guy who did the 12 steps and 12 traditions. The guy who started AA was also a trance channeler. Same way, you could do the same thing. And what a trance channeler is, a channeler, and then there's a trance channeler. So a channeler is just somebody who's relaying messages. He's talking to a being or an angel or his higher self or whoever, and he's relaying messages back and forth. Oh, he says this, he says this. But a trance channeler is somebody where the body is actually, the being takes over the body. And there's even a DNA experiment. I'll end with this. I did this DNA experiment. If you've ever seen one of the trance channelers was Jay-Z Knight, and she did this experiment where they test her DNA before she channels and when she's channeling. And when she's before she channels, her DNA is a female from France. When she's channeling Ramtha, she's a male from Iceland. And I wanted to do this experiment to back this thing up. We're still trying to find we're trying to get Bashar, we're trying to get some real good trance channelers. And if we can duplicate this experiment, the whole world's going to change, because it's going to say that if you're a trance channeler and the being takes over, your DNA becomes the being's DNA. The whole idea that DNA is not physical, it's consciousness related. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the weird stuff I sort of work on the side to try to verify these very weird experiments that people have done that sort of indicate we've got the whole thing all backwards. We think we know what's going on. I can absolutely guarantee you people have not got a clue of what's going on. This thing is way more complex than people could ever even imagine.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks again, Grant. And I really can't wait to read your psychedelics book. Once I've had time to read and digest it, I'll hope you'd come on again to the podcast to discuss it.
Sure.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy.
Oh, brilliant. That would be amazing. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Okay.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you again. Thanks.
Enjoy your day.
Thanks for your interest.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
We'll be back in just a moment. But first, here is a message that Planet Man wants you to hear.
So that was the latest episode of the SAP. I hope you enjoyed it. Written and produced by David Logan, music by Mankey, Lethargic and Hot Jupiter. And you can find Mankey's album, The Lonesome Planet Man, on Bandcamp. I'll put a link in the show notes. That was my dog. The opening music is by Lethargic, and a link can also be found in the show notes. Tune in next episode for Mike Cleland, folks. Stay safe, folks, and remember, these kids are running wild, and I'm still recovering from church.